The wisdom of ripening. Thank you for joining us again today. Subscribing and leaving a like are the kindest support you can give.
I did not know a shared blanket could turn into a dare. The harbor wind was cold, yet our breath kept finding the same heat. Hello. I am Nora Bennett, 61, from Asheville, North Carolina, where I run a small lunch counter. I have been widowed for years and told myself I liked the quiet. I drove to Rockport, Maine, for sea air, and a booking error rewrote my evening. The owner checked her screen and said one room remained for 2 guests. Would we share? My pulse stumbled and then rose. He was Daniel Ruiz, 68, retired from banking in Portland. Short gray hair parted left and a gentle crease when he smiled. He lifted my suitcase and the weight left my hand, as if a door opened inside my chest. The room held 2 narrow beds and a window of winter light. We opened the sash and the curtain breathed. The air grew close. The sheets were cool as paper. Chowder waited on the deck with a small bottle on ice. First glass to swallow awkwardness, second for braver questions, third to admit how long we had both been lonely. A gust shook the table and our fingers met to steady the wobble. He said he had not planned to travel again. I said my house had grown too quiet around plates and linens. He loosened his collar. We returned to the room. The door closed and the sound landed inside my ribs. I hung my cardigan. He slipped a button. The temperature rose and I felt all of it. 2 glasses waited between our beds. He looked up and his eyes shone like wet sand under a thin moon. He stepped close and words grew spare. His breath skimmed my cheek and the harbor salt brushed my tongue. Our hands asked first, palm to palm, relearning an old grammar. The body remembers, and heat kept time like a tide. Our mouths met and parted with care. In my chest a small sound opened like a window long stuck. My hair grazed his jaw. A clean citrus note steadied me. I held myself straight, then let the stiffness drain. After a while I gave a light laugh. He stepped back and searched my face. I said we should stop here tonight. He nodded, eyes keeping the glow of a lamp not quite off. We lay on separate beds and watched the same ceiling while the bottle cooled. The curtain stirred and the night moved in. The warmth of his skin still lived in my fingers. From 2 beds our breathing found one rhythm and rocked like a low wave. Before sleep I wrote a line in my head. Today may look like a mistake to others. Yet it begins a sentence I have waited to write. I drifted. Even a weathered body keeps an ember and embers know one another. Near dawn I woke to a room half dark. He lay on his side breathing evenly. I tugged the blanket higher and told myself that morning might test us. But the tremor of tonight was true. Here the first night ends. The tide is far, but breath is close. I pressed the last ripple back into my chest. Light came thin through the curtain and pooled at the hem of the blanket. Night still lived in the air. A low warmth that had not learned the word goodbye. I sat up slowly and listened to the harbor bell. Daniel stood at the window with his hands in his pockets. His shoulders were quiet. I said I slept. He said he did too, and a soft piece of last night held on to his voice. Down on the deck the owner brought oatmeal with berries and a pot of coffee. She laughed and said we looked like an old married pair. I smiled. He paused with his spoon and then finished the bite. The moment brushed us like a cold wave. We walked the harbor streets. Laundry steamed at a back door. A shopkeeper sprinkled salt on the steps. I said maybe I rushed us. He shook his head. Daniel said we only recognized something that had waited a long time. By the railing he let out a breath and set his palms down. He said he had a surgery a few years ago and he manages his sugar now. Some days he rests often. He said it plain and it steadied me. I took a small glucose candy from my pocket. Years of habit. I set it on his palm. He nodded. We sat on a bench and watched the white fray at the edge of the water. I set my hand over his and felt the quiet beat there. The cold made the skin cool and the cool made me want to keep it warm. Back in the room the light was brisk and honest. I folded my blanket as if putting away a hot secret. He clicked open a pill box and water rang the glass. Numbers and times became a kind of care. We drank water at the small table. I said we might be moving fast. He said what if fast is only the name other people use for a scene they did not live. I did not answer. Words and breath went different ways for a while. He said he would walk alone and sort his thoughts. I said I would be around. The door made a soft thud that stayed in the room. I went out into the bright streets and wrapped my scarf. Letters on windows blurred in the sun. My face in a shop pane looked like a woman who had set a heavy jar down and was deciding whether to lift it again. At the shore he stood with a paper bag and a bottle of water. He said he was ready to keep walking. I nodded. We moved the same direction. He said he does not want to burden his children. And he does not want to burden me. I said I want a love that does not tip the table. Our feet kept time and our minds lagged behind. Near dusk the deck lights came on and the owner brought simple soup. Chopsticks and spoons clicked. Even that small sound tugged at the thread between us. Back in the room I sat by the window and said I would save my words. He said yes. The yes landed like a pebble in a deep bowl, and sent a ring outward that did not stop for a long time. We lay down. The ceiling was the same, but the color had shifted. Warmth on my fingers cooled yet did not go out. There was a pilot light, and I held the small fire with both palms. And let the night pass around it. Dusk thinned the noise and the harbor drew a deeper breath. I went down to the sand and let the wet edge take my shoes. Warm grit, quick erasing, the way. A thought fades when you stop holding it tight. I bent and lifted a small white shell, thin and sure. There are feelings like this, I thought, shaken by touch, not easy to break. Daniel came along the waterline with a sweater over his shoulders. We walked the same way and for a while said nothing. The tide kept its business. He nudged the sand and said he feared the after. Not the wanting, the after. I nodded. We already knew the sentence and were only choosing the commas. Wind pulled harder and I tightened my scarf. He set his hand on my hand for a second and the cool steadied me. I said our pace must learn from water. Too quick, we drown. Too slow, we drift away. At the breakwater the west went peach and then steel. I took a folded slip from my pocket, a line I had written at noon. I gave it to him. It said, let us not pickle your history or my grief. Let us move slow but not stop. He read and tucked it into his inside pocket. He said thank you and did not dress the words. Lights came on at the inn. We ate a plain supper and poured tea. Chopsticks clicked and left a bright ringing between us. He went up first. I stayed and held the night on my tongue like a square of dark chocolate. In the hall I left a shell in a small envelope, and slid it under his door with a line, "I will lift my share of the hesitation." In the room I dimmed the lamp and listened to the second hand behave. Sometime a gentle step reached my door and paused. It did not knock. Silence added a floor to the dark. Before dawn the window opened and closed, a capful of water poured. The pill case murmured. I counted each sound like a bead. Calm grew, light as lint. I thought of hospital curtains from another year, the bell at the nurse's desk. The door that would not open again. I had carried that door in my chest and tonight I set it down for an hour. I did not look back to see if it stayed. Toward morning the harbor lights blinked and a small boat returned. The planks must have smelled like salt and rope. I held that smell in my mind and let sleep come for what was left of the dark. Back in Asheville the lunch counter, filled with the steam of soup and the friendly clatter I had missed. Between orders his text arrived. Clinic went fine today. May I come down next week? I wrote come, I will keep the broth hot. On Friday he stepped through my door in a travel jacket with a small pack. I touched his shoulder and the room relaxed a notch. We ate late after closing, stew and cornbread. And 2 bowls set like lanterns between us. Words moved in the space like small fish. At dawn we walked the river path. Mist sat low and birds muttered in the shrubs. Every half hour he drank water. I peeled an apple with a pocket knife and we shared the halves. Balance grew in plain ways. During lunch rush he stacked plates behind the counter and learned the rhythm. He wiped a booth while I lifted a basket from oil. The sheen on the batter calmed me. We read each other's motion and the line went smooth. Later he opened a notebook. Breakfast, meds, steps, numbers, an afternoon nap. The neat lines looked like a fence that kept worry out. He said he could keep them better with someone looking on. I said we can keep them for each other. Evening we shopped the market. He held tomatoes to the light and I laughed. We posted receipts with a magnet on the fridge. The small squares looked like flags of a new place where we could both live. I flew north to Portland the next weekend. He waited by the gate and the day brightened without sun. His apartment smelled like soap and paper. And there were succulents in the window. He showed me a box garden on the balcony, small leaves pushing. We cooked noodles with greens from that box and ate by a low lamp. His wrist moved when he lifted the chopsticks. And the tendons made me feel less alone. After dishes we set tomorrow on a page. Walk in the morning, call the doctor, my order at the cafe. His call to his daughter, a check-in before bed. In the night I worried the way a string worries a tooth. What if this gentleness cannot last? Then I pictured him setting pills on his palm and me, stirring broth and hanging a towel and both of us on our own small tasks while thinking of the other. That scene brought my breath back. We went to his clinic for a routine check. I sat with a magazine and watched names go in and out. He came out and said he was fine and just needed care. We drank hot tea on a bench. The heat went through the paper and into my hands and stayed there. When the sharp air of early winter came he handed me a cream envelope. The corners were a little worn. Inside were photos and a small key. The photos showed his living room, my counter, the river path, the balcony garden. On the back of the last one a short line. Will you live with me? I turned the key in my fingers and heat gathered there. He said I could take time. I nodded, but half my weight had already stepped across his threshold. I told my regulars I would close for a short winter break. I wrapped pots and wrote little notes on each box. The more I packed, the quieter my mind became. Leaving did not fit. Going did. In Portland he waited with his hands in his coat. We shared the suitcase and walked. At the door he set the key on my palm. His eyes held the grain of a tree that had stood many seasons. The apartment was neat. A shelf space open for my jars. Towels, spices, a drawer for my tea. We did not make a speech. The rooms understood. That evening his daughter came by in a wool coat with careful eyes. We drank hot tea. She said she had not seen him smile like this in a long time. I said the same. The silence that followed had weight but not threat. At the door she bowed her head a little and said thank you. Night was kind. Same room, same blanket, no hurry. We read each other slowly like a book found in a family trunk. Patient with its old paper. Desire did not bury tenderness and tenderness did not refuse desire. Morning I made seaweed soup and he boiled eggs. Winter sun cut a bright stripe across the table. Photos lay open beside the bowls. And we laughed at how serious we both looked while trying to look casual. We wrote our small rules. Pills checked together. Heavy feelings spoken the day they arrive. No sulking overnight. One spoken kindness each day. 4 lines to frame a house. Then we added this: we may change any rule if real life asks. We shopped and lined receipts on the fridge with a blue magnet. We covered the garden box for the cold. When our hands chilled, we traded gloves and the saved warmth felt like a secret. At night we sat with a lamp and kept 1 page each. I wrote a single line. Tired and happy. He looked up and smiled and I saw winter and spring meet inside that look. Snow dusted the window later and the room breathed with us. I turned toward him under the blanket and our arms found each other. No tremor now, only a steady coast. I set 1 more line in my chest. Late love keeps the best heat. If anything in video resonated with you, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Your simple words can become a ripening wisdom that changes someone else's life. If this video reminds you of a family member, friend, or acquaintance, please share it with them. This single video can offer a little comfort and great courage to those who are struggling alone. You can't buy health, but you can hit the subscribe and like buttons. A wise choice you can make right now. If you'd like to join us on this journey of ripening wisdom, be sure to subscribe, like, and turn on notifications. I am truly grateful to be a part of your journey toward a golden, ripening life. Your actions today can create a different tomorrow. Thank you for joining us today at The Wisdom of Ripening. We'll see you in the next video. Always stay healthy and have a day of grace and dignity.